so it has that capability of gathering the heat. So when we look at forest management, what happens with the snowpack, solar radiation hitting it, this one gets solar radiation. These are issues we want to look at in the plan. So with that, I'm going to, anybody have any more questions?
I guess I'm concerned that people are so overwhelmed, especially in the ag with everything that's going on, that you know what, when I call people up and say, what do you think about this? You know what their response usually is? Just leave us alone. And I can't argue with them. I understand where they're coming. Why don't you just tell government to leave us alone? And I think as good as job as you've tried to do, and I've been kind of on the ground floor with this, with you from the RCD, the majority of people haven't a clue what you're talking about. And because here my brother's on the board, he didn't have a clue what we always talking on. We've been talking about this for a long time. But there's so many regulations, and they don't want any part of it, and they just want to be left alone. So we've got our big job of getting the right people to get here to work on this.
Well,
because
this is not a regulatory plan.
It doesn't matter. In their minds, this is a problem. And though the CRIM did a good job of what they did, there's a perception out there that the CRIM was running the county and for a few years, and they still are struggling with the fact that who's in control down there? Plumas Corp still's there and all this. So we've got some education to do before we ever get to get the right people to come on board. And that'll have to do with us that are here inviting people, but people aren't going to come out of the woodwork to help on this. And I guess what I'm still confused with some of them, do we have to do projects? Grants is another issue like you talked about, whether you're for them, it's like we're all struggling to get these grant monies, whether RCDs or whatever it is, because that's now how you make your living so that you can pay your help to do it. And for a lot of us, we think that's not our money. Even though it is, it's like, I don't want that money because with that money comes strings of some kind. You don't get that money unless you're doing something exactly like the state wants to do it or whoever wants to do it.
Foundation.
Yeah. So a lot of people think, is it worth it? You know, do this. But so I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of education to be done.
Yeah.
And so you're gonna have to help us so we can get the right people to help form this, because it's something that's not gonna go away, it's something we need to do. And the projects are gonna be on private and public land. There's no real distinction about where this money is going to go.
And again, this is not a regulatory plan. A general plan is a regulatory plan. I'm not going to hide from that fact. This is not a regulatory plan in any shape or form. It will not result in an ordinance that requires you to do anything.
Right.
It will probably result in the opportunity for you to identify a problem and maybe find a funding source. And the simplest way to explain. But it was absolutely.
So the ones that are, say, working now, I mean, how many projects do they do a year? I mean, the other ones in other areas, what have they morphed into over the years, or what do they do?
I don't have the numbers on the grant awards, but the Prop 50 grant for Plymouth County was $7 million.
That's what we could have.
That's the amount of money, the total amount of money in that grant.
That came as a result from the previous IRWM.
That was a result from the previous IRWM.
But if we wanted to use just that money for a road or a bridge or something, you're saying sewer lines and this kind of stuff, that money is not just watershed money?
It's municipal water is the main thing for it, wasn't it?
No, it actually, municipal, we were able to convince DWR to allow us to reprogram the Last Chance 2 Pond flood money into a municipal projects. There were no municipal, the only municipal project in that grant was the Quincy Wetlands Project. There's a study by Dr. Cavas in the Sierra Valley that's looking at water and climate. There was the Sierra Valley Well Capping Project, which the RCD basically wanted to go away from, and we're really getting another study a result of that will help benefit the Sierra Valley Groundwater District in managing and updating or doing a groundwater management plan. That's the only, that they have to do, by the way, that's the only watershed groundwater basin in the Upper Feather River that is mandated to meet that new state regulation. No other ones are on the priority list to do that. So they're sort of the leader, and hopefully that information that's coming out of those studies in the grant will assist the groundwater management district in meeting that new mandate. So what else was in there? The forest got a considerable chunk of money to do road improvements related to sediment and drainage issues. 1.2 million, I think it was. I met with them. They spent all of about a little under 500,000. The Heart Cave Ranch got about, I'm gonna say around $500,000 to improve its water system. Originally it was to rebuild the old conveyance from Taylor Lake through the ditch, when they've since said, no, that's not a good idea, and they're changing it to groundwater wells. So there was a benefit, and that's a land trust project. It helped the land trust buy some land in Sierra Valley, the old town site out there, that they now do bird tours and stuff like that. What else?
Another Holly.
Yeah, it's still there.
Yeah, I know it's still Holly.
So it was primarily a resource grant as it was constructed. This is an opportunity for us, and this will come from the municipal side, to look at infrastructure issues also. You know, I know Dan's shop provides funding for resource land improvements for ranchers and the forest.
And this plan would help anybody, if there are projects identified in this plan, and the person wants to do something in that watershed with us, and it gives their project priority. If you're doing a project that also is identified in this plan, that this group is one, you know, we've all identified these high priority projects, maybe it's whatever it is. If your project feeds into that, then it would be a high priority for funding. Separate now, the funding you were talking about, mostly state, I just want to mention, not federal. So there's different for state funding, the way I understand it, is the state doesn't want to just willy-nilly all these grants out like they have in the past. They want the local watersheds to figure out what's important to them, and prioritize, and then apply for the state funds through these propositions, and already have it identified in the plan. So that the state, when they're putting this money out, feels like it's already been vetted and it's a local priority. So that's kind of the intent, and so we're trying to develop this, is that right, Randy?
Yeah.
So that's basically it.
So if it's part of the plan, it's got a higher chance of happening. The other thing is, you know, when I look at agriculture, you know, irrigation efficiency, we probably all could do a better job there. And have needs for infrastructure improvements related to that. I know that you do a lot of that, Dan, through the NRCS. But I'm looking at that as, okay, well, if it's in the plan, then there's a higher opportunity, maybe there's some funding to help you do that. Also, again, this overall understanding of the watershed, the issues. We don't understand each other's issues very well. And I think this whole process brings us all together to do that. Again, in a non-regulatory environment. To go, what are your problems? I didn't know that. I didn't know you had those kinds of problems over there. Wow, that's, you know, and you didn't know I had these problems. And we're sitting at the same table going, wow, maybe there's some mutual solutions we can come up with. You know, I just look at it, you know, a planning process is also bringing people together in a positive way. And this is an opportunity to look at the whole watershed.
Randy, when we're looking for funds, do these only come from like Prop 84 then?
Now, I look at it as any fund.
They can apply for any amount, if I had $50 that I wanted to give away, and I go to you and say,
Or you, all of a sudden you get through this and I get an email, and Holly gets emails on funding opportunities, I'm sure, and you're going, what do you do with it? Who can apply for it?
Yeah, the Bureau of Records.
okay, that's what I was wondering though, is there an oversight of what the strings are to these? That the grant doesn't make policy for everyone to live by?
the grant, this will make us policies for everybody to live by.
Well, I
The
think
individual
your
grant,
question is to the individual funding source that, right, and I think
Whatever funding source you go
that's
through, there has to be a string attached.
going
or
to
it wouldn't
depend
be.
on your funding source.
And that's the strings that are gonna come with the money, the color of the money's gonna dictate how you can do it, it's not this plan.
not the grant.
Right, the plan, I think, is more like the identification, like the assessment, identification of what the issues are, and they're been enforced or supported by the bodies here, so that when there's potential funding and you decide, hey, there's way too many strings for this funding source, and then, how many hoops and administration are gonna go for that, but this is a pretty straightforward thing, and we have something that supports that, and we have the skill set to apply for this fund, and I'm not having to stand on my head to implement.
There's a boost for having it in within the plan.
Sure.
Or having it fit within this template that we're gonna be presenting you that'll help you apply for the grant more effectively. I mean, you're fire safe council, you're looking at funding opportunities all the time, right?
That's how we work.
So it's basically in the interest of the different user groups in the watershed to have projects in this plan. No guarantee they'll get funded. That is just identified as, hey, I'm just gonna say this and then say it's plumb all of the Indian Valley with pipeline. Hey, throw that in there, if you had $1 million, you could do this and save this much water. Maybe someday there would be money to do something like that. We could say, hey, we've already identified it in the plan. All you have to do is fill out a little grant form, simply say, look, we've got this plan, we've got this process, we've identified this, and you've got money to do this kind of thing, we can do it. We've already shown, we've already vetted it at the local level, so then it'd be easier to get that money to, and I'm just using it as an example.
There's a leveraging you can use for projects coming as a result of this. And a better understanding of
But
what
what
this
I
funding
had,
source is gonna look for.
but what I was trying to clarify earlier is that we're probably not gonna be able to do the two things with this plan, which is develop a plan and apply for funds by the deadline. Because that's basically the mechanism the state is requiring. Like I said, they want everyone to have an IRWM plan in place before they give any more proposition money out.
There might be some caveats, and I've gone back and forth with Debbie Spangler over that, and nobody really knows, and she doesn't really know. If we get to the point where we've developed goals and objectives, that might be enough, and we've got those really developed in the plan, that might be a trigger enough to be able to apply for some of those funds. We don't know. Again, Holly let it off with the drought report that I got from OPR this morning, and others get it too. And they all get it from OPR to just have a source there. When's the governor gonna stand up and start talking about the drought again? I see in the long range, maybe a little moisture next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, but I've seen that before, and then it goes away. I look at the scientific model discussion on the Weather Underground website, and they're talking long range. There's a pretty serious high pressure system. I've got one little application that's showing you the high and low pressure systems, looking at precipitation predictions going out 6 days. And I turned it on last week, and I watched the high pressure system off the coast kind of move north into the upper northern California. And there's what's called the Four Corners High. It develops in the Four Corners area. The whole west has got this big high pressure system. So I'm looking at the state doing some drought stuff real soon, real quick. I think Holly's sending out this email to me, and she had never done that before. I worked with her more on the military compatibility. Holly Roberson sending it out to me. I gotta get my Holly's stack, there's a lot. Is maybe a prelude, the governor's gonna be doing some more things pretty soon, because.
You're gonna get another one in a minute.
Watch it, but I'm gonna send you some emails, that's for sure.
We're gonna hear some more rumblings from the state. That changes that equation that Dan's been talking about, because one of their sources of funds is that pot of pool from Prop 84. So that may accelerate it even beyond our capability. who knows what's going to happen and all that. We got the bond money, and there's an allocation in there. Like I said, Leah Wills understands that, has been researching that allocation. Likelihood, we'll probably be able to move along and be able to do some of that. But I'm looking for the governor to stand up and reaffirm the drought declaration he did last year, and then just be a series, a plethora of things that are going to hit the fan as a result of that. Probably see that in February, I would guess, because I don't think we're going to get out of the drought. I wish we would. Last year grazing on the forest lands was really cut back.
Well, yeah, water limited, stockpile limited a lot, not so much the feed. Yeah, so.
Can we move to the next thing?
Yes.
I'm supposed to be I don't have the exact time for where I'm supposed to help.
Thanks, Randy.
You're good, you're good.
I'm going to try to keep my comments.
I think the overview though is there will be funding that comes through, especially the upper watershed, and if we have a unified front and we can find common ground, then it increases the chances that we're gonna do good projects on there.
I see it as, you might as well get started now, because we're gonna be here for a long time.
And we're gonna have stuff to do. And water efficiency, I think, is the best thing we could look at, especially as ag. Well, we can get people to work together and get water moved more efficiently, it seems like.
Some efficiencies in one area are deficits to another.
It's called return flows that go back
Right,
into the system.
and groundwater and everything else. So the more efficient we are, sometimes is less water.
Yeah, when you clean that ditch, it hasn't been cleaned for a while. Neighbors get mad where the water was going and now it doesn't go there anymore. That might be efficient, but
Or if we pipeline the mill race through Taylorsville, a lot of the shallow wells would be dry.
Yeah, there is the whole trade-off in the whole ecosystem service, because sometimes you increase that, there's now not a wildlife watering place because it's in a pipe underground. And again, when it's in the pipe, it's not returning either subsurface or going down to the ground.
Well, in the Mountain Meadows Basin, that's what a lot of the landowners that I work with are concerned about, is just how to make their system more efficient, because they have these porous ditches and it's tough to manage the water. So that's one of the things they've identified as a really high priority. And they're trying to figure out how to put together a, existing conditions report or a sense of what is on the ground and what could be done, but it costs a lot and they don't know how they're gonna pay for it.
Yeah, but the benefits of doing that would pay for themselves
That's not.
without a grant.
And there is a scientific informational element to this plan, and that's important to recognize. There's so much information out there. Part of the website has scientific science. How do you understand the relationship between the mill race pipeline and those groundwater wells? Well, we're kind of guessing at this point because we really don't know, but we're predicting that. So science is part of all this.
So with regard to that science question, because I asked UMA, we had some studies that were done with regard to the Prop 50 money that we got for the irrigated, when we started with the irrigated lands program. And I started some of those, like some of the DO study or the pathogen studies and stuff like that. So she said I should submit those for their.
Get them on the website.
Is there anything like that people are already doing, like is the groundwater management district, the GWR reports? I mean, some of that is already out there in a public place, but does it need to then get reshuffled over here so that?
That's, to me, Holly, that's the whole reason I got my arm twisted into doing this, is that we are all very scattered, and what we're doing is, to Rick's point, we're overwhelmed as individuals trying to deal with all these issues. So how can we use this process that we're already being required or asked to participate in to take advantage of all that information that's available? We've got our Upper Feather River Watershed Group doing very good work, but folks in municipalities aren't necessarily hearing that. How do we bring that together? And to me, that is a potential benefit of what we're doing here, because it positions ag in a much better spot to make our issues heard. We are the economic driver for the county, unless you look at the Forest Service. So how do we get this information? Because we've had these very individual fragmented efforts in the past as we try to deal with the regulatory program. We've got a new regulatory program on our plate. Can we use this process to come to consensus as an ag group? We have support from our broader community that we're already doing all these things. How do we bring it to light? So that's where, to Holly's point about bringing forth all the existing information we already have. I mean, there's a lot of that data floating around. How do we bring that through this process to make sure folks who are making decisions or pointing fingers understand what we are doing? Because there are things we're already doing well that's not highlighted enough, and maybe there are some issues we need to address as an ag community. But what I get frustrated with, and probably Brian does too, we see individuals obtaining significant amounts of grant monies that don't necessarily help the broader ag community. So how do we come together as a group and find some ways to access that through a plan that has backing from our county government, from our urban neighbors, as urban as they are in Plumas and Sierra counties. So hopefully that's what we can bring to the process. That's why I'm here. I have plenty to do without doing this too. So I don't know if anybody agrees or disagrees. I'd welcome comments to that effect. But yes, there is a call for data. So that's where, you know, we have extension to depend on. Our other work groups don't necessarily have that. We've got our county ag commissioner's office. We've got a lot of folks who've already collected a lot of information that needs to be brought to this process. So it's included. And so if there's things, if you look at the website and see there's areas that are not addressed, we need to bring that forward because it only helps us in the long run. So that's my thought in this. We have our cattlemen's groups, we have our Farm Bureau groups, we have our Upper Feather River Watershed group, we have our CDs, we have our NRCS, we have all these groups doing lots of things, but how do we bring it together? And hopefully we can through this process. So with that, Randy, I don't know if you had anything else in terms of the background. Does everybody have a good feel? Because again, I'm trying to get my arms wrapped around this as well.
Hopefully I helped you a little bit.
Yeah, no, that was good.
I have one stupid question, I guess. Who's in charge? You know, we've got a board, okay? Is the county take the lead over the board, or the state, or just?
All right, so the way it works, I'm the grant manager, and effectively, at some level, I am in charge. These people work with me on agendas. I'm attending all the work group meetings, at least initially, maybe all of them in the end. The Regional Water Management Group is in charge. I mean, there's a certain format that's laid out in the grant, and standards we have to meet for Prop 84 to fulfill the grant agreement. Right now, the leadership in that Regional Water Management Group is Supervisor Paul and Paul Rowan, Supervisor Paul Rowan. They really have a lot to do they're the leaders in the end result. They're in charge. Sort of defaults to me as the planning director and the manager of this grant. So you can say I'm in part in charge, but critical decisions are made by them.
Yeah.
Not by me. I may make a decision on how a staff report goes to the working groups, the format and other things, but ultimately that Regional Water Management Group is in charge. They'll make all the final decisions on the plan. They'll look at all the projects that you bring forth. You know, Dan, we don't have to prioritize them. I didn't know that until I was working with Numa today. So it could just be a huge list, some huge laundry list, or they could decide to prioritize it. But that's who's in charge.
Thanks.
So that's the student committee, so like the one that Jim's on.
Right,
Jim's
yeah,
there from the
yeah.
So
government.
he's part, I would say he's in charge too.
And then
And Bill and.
the supervisors will see that someone, when Sherry is gone, that someone is replaced.
Well, Sherry just entered a new 4-year term,
And this has to be, there's a timeline on
2
this.
years.
This will be done before her term is up.
And if we can do it faster, guys, we will.
Right, but that management group will still be there doing their job.
In the future, then the board The board
She's there
appointed,
as a rep from the board and there's a
Right,
rep
she
from the
volunteered
flooding
for this,
district.
so this.
yeah, but the board of supervisors approved her participation as they did Paul.
And they will again next time. And,
But once this
and,
project is done, or the plan is done, Randy, the management group will go away, correct? Then it will be the county.
You know, I'm thinking
Or not
when we get to that point, the management group may not wanna go away. They may not wanna meet to update a plan, but they may wanna meet to just understand the status of the watershed. And we don't have a clear crystal ball on what the state may come up with next. So, they may, right now, it's Prop 84 for IRWM, this is Prop 50 for IRWMs before, maybe there'll be Prop X, and we'll be doing another plan update. I don't have that kind of crystal ball. I do hope that one of the end results, Holly, is continuing communication and understanding throughout the watershed. And that's why when Uma and I looked at the organization, one of the things we looked at was that cross-section clear across the watershed. Is it perfect? I'm not gonna admit it is. Is it a good try? I would say that. To see what, and so, that'll be up to the group, whether they wanna continue in that effort or not. Or
So their job is to get the plan
done.
done, that's their job.
And then that would
Where it goes from
hopefully,
there,
that would potentially be guiding policy moving forward, that we've got this plan to look back at and everybody came to some agreement. So at least we've got a starting point when we have new things come. So. And my job will be done within 2 years.
Your contract fulfilled.
I'm done. All right, so is everybody feel we're on the same page with that, with background and kind of why we all got together today?
So who does this website, the FurtherRiver.org?
The consultant, Uma, that Randy's been referencing, she's taken the lead on that, but actually Nils'
My
brother is actually doing the website itself. So it's a pretty open format. So obviously it's housed within our county government URLs, but at the same time, this is pretty open for us to be submitting information. So this is our opportunity to say, ag is already doing all these things, and here we are. Here's all these studies to help demonstrate that. So, or activities. So, but we'll get into that here in a minute. Just real quickly, Randy's already touched on the work groups that we have. So obviously we're with the ag group and the other, the uplands and forest management, the floodplain meadows and management, municipal services. So they each have had this same meeting to talk about these management strategies. And as we get into that, we'll see that there's a lot of overlap, but there's going to be certain things that ag should be taking the lead on. We want to drive how that comes out in this plan. Work group structure, again, we've got all you folks being public stakeholders and all the signatories that Randy spoke about. Then the coordinators, so Holly George has been helpful in being a co-coordinator to keep me on track. But part of our job today is to select a chair and vice chair. And that person has some responsibility to go to those management group meetings and report what we do here. So these work groups are going to meet 4 times this year, and again 4 times 2016. But you have 2 secretaries, whoever ends up being in that role. You're going to have some people and resources to help get you there. So it's not like you're going to be left on your own to make those reports or anything. So this might be one of your better volunteer gigs because you do have a secretary. And so then that we are the liaisons to the management group. So, and they are also, they're meeting every other month. Is that correct, Randy? Yeah. So our focus, and again, this is guidance from the California Water Plan as far as what we are supposed to be focusing on in our ag land stewardship work group, is the irrigated lands, water quality issues, ag water supply reliability, and ag water use efficiency. So here again, to echo what we've talked about, we're already doing a lot of these things. So how do we just bring that to light through this process in a little more organized fashion that ultimately, for me, I thought it would be helpful in just helping us getting our arms wrapped around all these various initiatives, to Rick's point, you talk to folks and they're just overwhelmed. So here's a way to funnel that into one avenue. So our role as a work group is to provide recommendations to the management group on what we think is important and what will help us succeed with our priorities. We're going to provide input on that project selection, but we can potentially bring these ideas of projects, and they don't have to be scoped out entirely. They can be conceptual project ideas that we bring forward. So, maybe it is doing a pipeline to the Taylorsville Mill Race because of the broader benefit to that entire valley, or maybe not, but just example. And so the first year, and to me, Randy, this seems a little backwards in my mind, but this is how it's proposed. The first year, we actually will focus more on these resource management strategies and project idea generation, and we'll have a timeline here in a second. And then the second year is a bit more focused on the actual plan document, and we'll comment on that and review that. So that's our chance, as I see it, Randy, to comment on what the other work groups have brought forward. So we may be able to point out where a municipality or a Upland Meadows group, one of their goals is a bit in conflict with what we need to do within ag. How do we come to some consensus on that? Is that fair to?
Yeah, and the other thing is, the reason it's kind of that way is what Dan was bringing up, to try to get ready for grants. In other words, do the resource management strategies, the goals, and projects in order to position ourselves as soon as possible for any funding sources that may come up. Again, maybe Prop 84, likely not, I'm not gonna, but that's why when we structured the work program and the grant agreement, went back and forth, where do we do that? Let's do it as soon as possible. The plan development chapters a little later. And they'll have to be consistent with all those goals, but we figured if we got that done, we might get there, but we don't know. So yeah, that's why it seems kind of counterintuitive.
Right. And so as part of this, we're going to be having these meetings. And again, it's a chance to try to build on things we've already have to stay up to speed on. So we've got a new regulatory program. So we have an opportunity to bring technical experts. Do we need to bring Ken Tate to a meeting? Because he can update us on a variety of issues, but he can also help us as we're trying to make some decisions about what this plan should be.
So just related to the meetings, because I thought one of the things we talked about was, after this intro thing, maybe there are certain things that we can tie this meeting in conjunction with
Yes.
a meeting that's already going on. Like we talked about, say, like there was the water summit, that was last fall or something, where we're already having people coming together at some locale. So it's not like all the meetings have to be here in Quincy, or if there's some other thing that we can dovetail in to make the best use of people's time versus it being seen as another thing. I gotta take a day out of my
Right.
work.
So with that, we have to, again, this is kind of further down the presentation, but we need to have another meeting in March. So that was what I wanted to open that up. Is there something else going on that I'm not aware of, because I don't live here all the time, that we can, whether it's a cattlemen's meeting, a Farm Bureau meeting, we just dive off into a portion of that where people have already set aside a day, and we can take a couple hours to address some of the things we need to get done here. So that would be my goal, that we can collaborate on already existing meeting schedules as much as possible.
But we see that particularly with this group. Try to do that as much as we can.
Because there's very few of us.
And by the way, these are live broadcasts and put on the website. Future view. So all your comments. You're on the way right now.
Just letting you look.
If you didn't know that camera.
No, he's
My
It's
hat's
not
on
just
for
recording,
that reason.
it's live broadcasting.
Our RSP meets every third Thursday of the month, so I could be a date.
Okay, that's good to know. And so that's where, Carol, I don't know if you have any, we don't necessarily have any.
We don't have regular meetings. The RCD meets its first Wednesday of the month, or ceremonies.
So that might just be a logical target. Although it takes over our entire surrounding.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where we would you know, potentially some of those people are already participating in this group, so we just have it that same day, so people aren't setting aside another entire day to get somewhere. So, so I might email all of you and just, we'll gather up kind of a calendar of dates and then see what works best. And then, so again, coordinator role is to provide that meeting support, information needs. If we need more information, we've got folks we can reach out to get that to the group. And again, for that chairperson and the alternate, we are a resource that you're not left to your own devices to make any of these reports. So, and then the slide was in here, but we're all pretty cordial to each other. So just keeping it polite till we get to the integration meetings. It might be a different story when we have the other groups there. So again, 4 work groups meetings per year. And some of the timing with that is dictated by, we want to make sure we can give some timely updates to the management group that we are making some progress. So some of that timing is dictated. That's why we need to have one in March to give them an additional update prior to their next work group meeting. And then, as Randy alluded, there's a climate change aspect to this. So there's that workshop. And again, that wouldn't necessarily require attendance from one of our members, the coordinator or the chair. We'd want them there, but not necessarily everyone is.
That may happen in August.
Okay.
So just clarify, this group's supposed to meet 4 times and the management committee's meeting 6 times a year? Is that?
Mm-hmm.
And believe me, in the original grant application, there was a zillion meetings. And then we later looked, it got us the grant. How's it gonna work?
So then we'll kind of vet this project idea as part of our work group. We won't necessarily get into that too much today, but there'll be 2 hearings where everybody will kind of come together to vet everyone's project solicitation. So that'll be the other 4 work groups. So that would be our opportunity if we see a project that's kind of in conflict or doesn't take into account some of our ag interests and it might have impacts, then that's our chance to say, hey, how can we change this a little bit so it makes better sense for the entire watershed. And then the plan, once that's drafted, we'll have 2 hearings for that, and then we'll hopefully be done. And there's a calendar here of all the management group meetings. Again, all this is on the website. So this would be, if anyone is a chair or an alternate or a coordinator, then we're being asked to be present at these meetings. So again, there could be a tag team effort to make sure that's realistic for people's schedules. So, because I know we all get maxed out. So we've got the website.
Can you find it? You can minimize the PowerPoint.
This is a Mac.
Make your, that link, make that a hot link, you wouldn't have to minimize it. You can go right to it.
On the Mac. I don't know how to do that.
PCs, you just make it a hot link. Make it a hyperlink.
Oh, it's already in Safari. You just go down
I know, but how do I minimize this in a Mac?
and
Where's the-
see the yellow key? There it is. I had to run that too to get that one. Just go down to the bottom and then it's on the
There you go.
right there. There's the website.
So that's the website. So again, there's this spot here for our documents. Right now, I think is where she was posting a lot of this data that's being collected. But this is where we need to be highlighting everything ag is already doing. I mean, we've got so much extension work. I mean, even the water quality plans that Holly was talking about, I mean, that's going back to the mid-90s, you know. That's the kind of thing that we need to have here. But if you're looking for any information, and again, information on what the other groups are doing also, then this would be the place to go. So it's just featherriver.org. And then if we have our agendas, any information specific to our groups are going to be posted in that work group section. There's also this map section. Let's see.
So
Nils,
if you want to add something, do you just send it to Uma, or do you send it to Zeke, or do you send it to that contact Gmail?
You can send it to,
I mean, I've been sending stuff to Uma, I mean, just because I get.
you can send it to Uma, They can send it to you, and then we can send it to Uma, you can send it to me, and I'll send it to Uma.
Okay.
There's something that comes out every Wednesday called California E Water News. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
It's pretty informative at times. Things pop up on it. The Rand Company Corporation's doing a lot of climate change stuff. Who's ever seen that newsletter? It comes out every Wednesday.
Always sends it to him.
You guys get it from Holly?
Well, sometimes, because I get in trouble for sending it to me.
That might be something that you get, you might want to look up and sign up for. I look at it, in 5 minutes, if there's nothing of interest, it's gone, but I do look at it every week. Every once in a while.
Same thing with that NARCO week in review, you guys, are you on?
I don't get that.
distribution
I get
list?
it, and that's what I sent him. I shared it this morning, shortly before or after you sent the drought thing.
Did you send that to me?
I think so, because
Yeah.
Maybe I should sign up for that one too.
From Bruce.
AKA Sam.
Sally Cole. They do rice and
Who's this?
that we can reveal. With Bruce.
yeah, that's that one.
Coalition.
Okay, so here's our fun part. This is our first housekeeping item, order of business. Rick, I know you're anxious to be our chairman, is that correct?
Just do. You said that already, so there's no doubt in my mind who it was going to be.
Yeah, it's clear to me.
Is that Rick?
Rick.
Because he wants to go report to his older brother.
There you go,
There's a
yeah.
real conflict of interest there. That would not look good. Yes, it would.
I call that conflict of siblings.
But I mean, that's maybe because I'm the oldest of 5 boys.
No, seriously, with that being said, if there's a volunteer for the chair, so do we need a little more description about what those duties entail? Again, it's primarily reporting to the management group, serving as a liaison to that management group, but you will have 2 people supporting you that,
And you do have to have the ability to speak in public. You seem to be there.
Yeah, but you do need to have the ability to just be organized. I don't have
You have a
that, but
secretary.
I've got a solution for this. I'd like to ask my brother Dave. It was him or I coming today, and it ended up me. But I think Dave could do that. He's
Oh.
no, I will. I'm telling you, I would ask him. Yeah. I would just say it was unanimous. Yeah,
You're
but
supposed to like somebody who's here.
Does this,
No.
just say Roberti and I'll just
This-
get one of them.
Very fantastic.
Yeah, does it have to be the chair for the duration, or
I
can
mean,
they?
no,
I
yeah,
just happened to hear today,
right,
I
right,
just happened here.
right, right. I would,
Somebody want to nominate?
No, that's what I would say.
So moved.
in
I
fairness.
just wondered if somebody else wouldn't wanna have it here at the next meeting.
I want to kind of dovetail what Holly's been saying. We recognize that in the ag community, there's some times of the year that you're so busy you can't even think. And other times of the year, not so busy. And what I'm hearing from the 2 Hollies is we really want to support the chair as much as we can so that it doesn't overburden you to the extent possible. So that's not quite the same situation with the other working groups. There's that relationship with the coordinators, but I think you got more support with these 2 ladies than the other working groups are gonna have, the other chairs are gonna have. Just because you have a team effort and an acute awareness of the seasonal issues that you may have in participation. Did that convince you?
No, I need to decline. I just.
And then Randy, I guess to Brian's question, if somebody commits to being our chair for the remainder of 2015, can we potentially have if
I don't see any issue in doing that.
if they're okay and said, I'm done and I've done enough, then if we can bring somebody else for 2016, so it alleviates some of the burden to an individual.
Yeah, so I think.
Spread the joy.
Yes.
I think that's totally up to the group, and if that's what
So
the
is there
situation is, I don't think
someone-
It is really just a spokesperson. is what you're looking for.
Yes.
But it's another day going with the crew.
Yeah.
My days are pretty much, I like to work.
But that's
So,
where,
you know.
yeah,
So if there's somebody that's maybe in Quincy or closer, I'm not quite
Russell Reed, he's not here.
Russell, Toria.
Yeah,
I don't have the heart.
Everything is
He's
on
coming
that
by now, and
management
he's
group.
on the management committee, he's
Yeah,
on
we
the
can't-
steering committee, so he can't be
Oh,
both.
Right.
And he's gonna be at that meeting anyway, but he's walking
I
up that walkway
represent-
right now, we can just tell him.
He's representing East
Everybody likes that, whoever's.
I don't know, I
leading,
can't, I
whoever,
gotta ask.
President or chairman or
Will your
whatever.
agency sign an MOU?
Yeah,
You're-
oh yeah. Yeah, I second your
You know,
I didn't want to make a brand issue.
Well, you
I
can.
just kind of came up in my 30 seconds.
They're like, what about Russell?
I'm cheered out.
so Russell, we're looking for a volunteer to be our chair. And we've even cut it back that they only need to commit to 2015 and we'll find a new one for 2016. And we've offered up that they have two excellent supports here named Holly. So we're trying to, what else can you help do to convince Rick Roberti that he needs to be chair?
No, this Rotary.
Well, if you like, you can develop a
This never goes
four-year
away.
backloaded program in about 5 minutes, or you can,
Yeah. And you are
Congratulations.
on.
I am,
Way to go.
I'm cheered out for my rest of my
Right.
adult life. I'm kind of like walking around.
Well, you would
Have an
be
anxiety
already
attack.
on the executive committee.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question just a minute? Just from YouTube. Is this enough people to really represent, or do we need to get a few more people in here to really cover what we need to cover?
Well, my hope is that we have Cattlemen's Farm Bureau represented, so maybe there'll be a couple people within those associations that represents a broader group. So we can take some of what our ag work group came to these conclusions, bring it to Cattlemen's, bring it to Farm Bureau. Everybody feel okay with that? If there's somebody, dissension, bring that back. But to me, we need to be tapping a few people from those segments in order to represent the broader group. Because if we get, obviously we want to invite as much input as possible, but if there's already consensus from Cattlemen's Association, let's just send a couple people to represent that, would be my thought. Because if we get a huge group within these work groups, it will make it difficult to kind of get
Yeah,
these
I know.
tasks accomplished.
So
So,
Dave needs to be here all the time too, along with you, for Farm Bureau.
Well, you could, yes.
I think there needs to be more people here and without being, because I don't believe that our local Farm Bureau and Cattlemen's meet often enough and they have a pretty full agenda to be able to quote adequately even talk about what's gonna happen, what you wanna do there. So I earnestly think I think that's a good place to update that. I just from past, and I haven't seen that there would be a whole lot of discussion about those things at those other meetings, so getting broader representation and from across the area, I think is good.
and if there's someone that Holly or myself should call to help explain what we're asking, that, we're not trying to create a whole nother homework project for somebody, but what the involvement entails, we can do that also to help.
I agree, I think, what we got, our Lewis Sierra Cattlemen's board, when there were 8 or so folks on those, and with the Farm Bureau, why couldn't at least 2 or 3 of those guys be thrown around into?
I think they could, I think if we went to them and said, this is what's going on, we need your help.
It's your responsibility
yeah,
as a
and this
board
is
member
what-
of those organizations.
Yeah, do you wanna
Right,
really
and
protect
so
our
that it's not
interests?
the one person representing 5, you may
Right.
be here, but we need to have some more voices, so that's, but again, we only have 27 zillion people.
Well,
but-
Right.
I don't think that's gonna happen if we could be a little selective about, we know
And the
who's
other
out
part is,
there.
are there some geographic areas, Neil says he's representing Mountain Meadows, you know, I'm trying to think, like even up at that Almore Basin, there is some agriculture, some folks there who maybe aren't members of our cattlemen's or Farm Bureau, but they are in the watershed and they are active in agriculture, you know, but how do they, you know, how are we even really reaching them?
Well, that was one of the reasons why I came, is because we've been working closely with those producers up there, and they can't make it, because they're, not only are they trying to run these leases, but then they also manage the timber, because it's like private timber companies. So since we worked together, then I asked if they were gonna come, I sent them the agendas, they said they couldn't make it. They, you know, I said, well, can I represent our concerns up there? And they said I could. And that was one of the main goals, because I kind of feel like that's kind of a forgotten corner of the area of the basin, and it's not even in our county, in this county, Clovis County, right? So
However it is.
I know, but so anyway, that's my effort to represent that whole basin.
Well, you kind of managed to get out of being chair on the Madison Stream.
Yeah, I don't want to be the chair. I'm going to try to be involved in the forest one too, right? Because I'm involved in the fire site. So I don't really want to be the chair of any of the groups, personally. And I certainly don't want to be chair of all three.
I don't know if it's critical, I mean, there's been some discussion whether we should have the chair appointed at the first meeting or not. And I've kind of rolled it over in my mind, and what I'm kind of hearing right now is the next meeting, maybe we'll have some broader participation. You guys can walk away from this meeting and maybe go, yeah, no, maybe this effort's worth participating in, and worry about the chair of the next meeting.
Mhm.
And Holly can represent this group at the work group meeting.
Yeah,
That Holly.
I just want to clarify.
Well, you'll probably go anyway.
I have another meeting on that day.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I'm not.
And this Holly has her other real job she's got to go to, so, but we'll figure out, I did speak with him about that.
I think it's worth waiting a little bit, because I think there's some other players that could really help us. Now that I understand it, and maybe Brian understands it, we might be able to explain
And we can do
the
a
importance of this.
quick kind of one page, here's what that chair is being asked to do as far as attendance at the meetings and the resources and what the goal and intent is here. So that would help too.
So just question again, and I realize this is an issue probably for all of the work groups, but because we're more intimately involved with agriculture and know all the other demands on people, what's a way for people to provide input if they can't come? They're interested in the topic, but they can't make the time to be at these work group meetings. Is there a process or a way?
Oh, I think there's a few ways to do that, Holly. One is through us as coordinators for the group. So if there's an individual concern, then there's the emails that are available on the website. So I have one that's the Upper Feather River Agriculture email, and then obviously y'all have Holly's email. So that's one way. There's also through the website, there's a map. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this again. To focus on, you can click on an area on the map and do a comment. And so then that gets pooled into an input opportunity.
Can I ask a question about that? So anybody can go in and identify that map?
And then the
And just
consultant
put-
will kind of,
You can put a pin on it. and
Yes.
put a
Pin on it.
statement.
You can do that too at these meetings, that's my understanding, and maybe that's my own
It would
agenda.
be,
so this map right here,
it could be a non-ag person.
if I click on
Go on
this,
there and click on something.
yes. So again, that's for individuals or a group as a whole. Plymouth Sierra Cattlemen's wanted to make this comment about this one area, then they can do that. So that's another way to contribute. Obviously, you can kind of send ideas via proxy, since so many of us are neighbors and know each other. But there's ways that individuals can comment without necessarily having to be at the meetings. Obviously, we want participation at the meetings, but if they want to do that, there's other ways to do that. So it's a pretty transparent.
Isn't there a call-in opportunity through the webcast too? I'm not,
I wasn't asked to bring a phone.
It did state that you could do that.
That you could conference in? Okay.
we're just starting this process.
I'll have to work on my technology then. I didn't get that one.
These are not easy processes to begin.
So
I'm gonna ask it, does the group want to defer choosing the chair and vice chair to next meeting?
That's what I'm getting.
Yes.
Okay,
So
so we're,
the best candidate.
Yeah. We really fought.
Well, he's disqualified.
Yeah, I'm disqualified anyway, huh? 'Cause I
We
can't
do.
do it because I'm on the board.
We just wanted to honor you with our respect, right?
Well,
Trust.
Well, you guys can work on Rick till the next
You
meeting.
can work on which Mr. Roberti.
Yeah,
There's
Mr.
only two
Roberti.
because one of them's already on that other
It
one.
doesn't have to be a boy.
No, that's right.
I know, but Rick did say Mr. Roberti.
Well, I talked to this Mrs. Roberti, she talked to me. Right when the segment came up, she said she can't.
I saw her whispering to you.
Yeah.
So we'll table our chair and alternate selection and distribute kind of a one-page summary so we can maybe talk to some other folks and see if there's someone who would be interested in doing that. It would be, so we won't, there's a management group meeting on the 28th. So ideally they did want to have an update as far as who our chair was. So obviously we won't have that done. But we'll want to hopefully have a good candidate or two to bring that we can make sure that does get done at our next meeting. So.
Think it over.
Okay, so I will be your acting chair today. And so our goal today is to identify the resource management strategies that this group wants to focus on and delve into a little deeper that helps align with things that issues that are priority to ag. So you would have gotten on the agenda, especially the one that Holly sent out, there was a link where you were asked to try to look at those beforehand. So hopefully some of you did. But we'll get into that here a little deeper in a second. But just real quickly, to give you a little background, DWR guidelines, and again, this goes back to the California Water Plan. So if you want lots of detail and you have fast internet speed, you can go download all that. I think, what is it, 800 pages total or something? But the resource management strategy, a technique, program, or policy that helps local entities manage their water and related resources. So DWR has a list, and we'll get to that list in a second. You also have a handout that has the list and a brief description of those or definition. So, and again, we'll get into this here in a little more detail. But the work groups need to identify some of those management strategies that we want to discuss and bring forward and delve into. So the other work groups identified too many.
Yes.
Because our goal is to get pretty deep into those topics. And as you look through the list, you'll see there's a few obvious ones that ag needs to be focusing on. But the thoughts from the other work groups were that we all have some opinions about a lot of these. And so they were picking, what, 18 or 20 of them. And so that's not appropriate for what we need to get done. That's just too much. But the idea that we pick 4 to 6 for our group to focus on doesn't preclude us from commenting on any of the others. So we as an ag group can comment on any one, but we don't necessarily have to dig into it that deeply. So there's going to be 4 to 6, and we'd want to probably cap it at that amount that we'll really focus on and make sure ag's voice is heard, because it really impacts our role in the watershed. But we won't necessarily delve that deeply into all of them. So
if I may, Holly's saying that based on what we saw from the 2 work group meetings. One of the impressions I have when we go through these, and you will be going through each one of them individually, is that you start to see the interconnectedness of all this, and I think that's why so many of them got chosen before. What we're going to do is try to get you to focus on those 4 to 6 intently, because you're going to see that connectedness. And you're going, well, that's relevant, that's relevant, that's relevant. It's really trying to focus you, and this is based on our experiences with the other 2 work groups. And ultimately, the regional water management group may have to help those other groups focus, so we're going to try to keep you focused this time.
So we'll get into each one individually here in a second, but just real quickly to kind of finish up our background about the plan in its entirety. But part of that is reviewing that water plan and these individual resource management strategies. And again, there's very detailed information that we'll want to be taking a look at some of these next meetings. But also identifying those additional challenges and things we need to be focused on. And then ultimately for the regional plan, we talked about how we're doing this in a little reverse order. We're doing the project scoping first and then the actual plan chapters in the second year. So Randy, I don't know how much we want to get into this. The project development, we've already kind of covered that and discussed that. Randy alluded to that guide. So we'll be getting into this aspect of our work here in subsequent meetings, but we've kind of already discussed how the timeline for this project development. No, thank you, I'm good. I had 3 on my way up here. So, yeah, exactly. So I think everybody pretty good understanding where we are with this project development concept, and that's going to be kind of our next meetings to really focus on that. Does everybody feel confident? Because this presentation was meant to be a bit of a backgrounder, so we kind of got off on a discussion.
So I had a comment.
Yes, sir.
When I went to last work group meeting, we kind of had like primary and secondary and what are these called again, these resource objectives. And I think as we're going through them, basically we're trying to like fight over each one. Maybe we just do something like that and put them up there.
And that's what, when we
That's-
sent the agenda
Right.
out, that we would have the ones that were
Right, and I think those are-
identified to part, for ag and then some that
And
maybe were
those are just,
overlaps.
and those are fine. It's too bad.
Yep. So Dan's right on track with what I had in mind, and a lot of this, I'm skipping through these slides because we've kind of really talked about all this already. We had some discussion. So our next, we talked about the schedule. Again, here, this is on the website, and I know you can't read this, but the little teeny version is in your handout. But again, year 1, our goals here to identify these resource management strategies, delve into those, begin to get together some conceptual ideas for projects that make sense from our work group. So that'll be year 1. Year 2 will get into more of the actual plan drafting. So that's a real quick overview. We've kind of touched on this already. So to Dan's point, we'll come back to this. My thought was to go through, we've got this slide here, and real quickly, we're gonna go through and just discuss each one briefly and not necessarily take a vote other than if we can do a quick vote of yes, absolutely, no, not necessary at all for us to talk about. So I'm thinking like there's salinity, focusing on saltwater intrusion and those sorts of things. That, yeah, so there's a few real obvious things that we can kind of get through pretty quickly, and then we can do a whole maybe category that we need to come back to and talk about in a little more detail to determine if that fits our group. So does that sound like a fair approach to kind of move it along?
How good's our insurance? Because that's, it depends on what projects we do and don't want to put on. Are we covered liability wise, the board itself? Is that a silly,
Where are you getting at?
if we do projects that hurt somebody, you understand, Dan?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but right now, I think
I know.
it's just, broad categories. When we get to that level, I think what we're doing is we're just identifying
Areas.
general area stuff. And then when it comes down to specifics of getting money and doing those things, that's when we'll probably talk more about, okay, well,
Liabilities.
if you're gonna pipe that ditch, then that's where my water gets in. We'll talk about that later.
So
In
that,
general, I agree.
because what these are, in these resource management strategies are a technique, program, or policy that helps local entities manage their water-related
Yeah.
resources.
So these are kind of overarching themes that will help develop the plan language and what is important to this watershed. So from,
Yeah, so all of those 30 whatever are out of the water plan, and what we're gonna do here in the next little bit is, she's got them all on there, and on the handout that, the link that was emailed to you guys, and then also with the handout that has resource management, has the little deal with a little more
Yeah.
description.
So we'll go through those individually. So if you want to find that handout, so you can see on the front page, it just says, there we go.
Holly's just being.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, confusing. But also, because that's the one we shared with you.
That's number
I
one.
mean, there was pink paper in my copy machine, so
Oh.
I.
How come you've got pink and
Yeah,
he's?
she's special. She's got the teacher
I'm
edition.
special.
That's right.
This is a teacher's
Gotcha.
version. The assistants.
The assistant.
There we go.
In Riverside County, when we finished the project, the final conditions we printed in pink, so there was no,
No, it's fine.
so we said, what do the pinks say?
So just to clarify, maybe you're gonna go there, is the reason these are gonna be the ones that our quote work group is going to focus on as far as then the next steps of potential projects or
Yep. So,
whatever.
so when we continue our discussions, we will have kind of vetted, so obviously, let's look at number one. It's pretty up. Agricultural water use efficiency. So without even reading the definition, I'm thinking that's gonna be a no-brainer for this group to focus on. So as we bring forward consensus ideas about projects, what we want to see this plan do, we're going to be referencing back to these resource management strategies that fits within our theme, what makes sense for our ag work group, the agricultural community as a whole. Randy, is that fair? That's so with that, I'll read that, but again, I think that's one potentially we can see as an obvious choice. The efficient management of water resources for beneficial uses, preventing waste, or accomplishing additional benefits with the same amount of water. So DWR has some examples here of possible approaches that would lend itself to the project concept. So then that would be taking it the step further. So the infrastructure, improving irrigation and water delivery systems, reducing evapotranspiration of irrigation and water delivery systems. And again, we can take into account as we delve into this more, if we get more efficient with pipeline, we lose other opportunities for recharging the groundwater supply. So we have to think about that. Technology, whether we're looking at different crops, fertilizers, et cetera, to improve efficiencies there in water use. So again, I think, is there?
So I just have a question. So on these examples, those are not necessarily ones that the group is married to. Those those are sort of bulleted things that either have already that fit related to that we can come up with our other things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of more we're looking at the first thing, the management strategy and the definition. Is that something that this group should be focused on?
Yes, yes. And so a few of these management strategies are a little vague, and so I think that was why they put in some examples to help you get a better sense of what they were trying to get at. And some of them are things that might be in conflict with what we want to do as an ag group. So, so with that, I was going to say if we have an obvious, except I can't do it on here.
I'll write on. I'm writing down here.
Okay, so ag water efficiency is a yes for this group to focus on. Okay. Okay, so again, we're gonna do obvious yeses, obvious nos, and then maybes. So we'll just talk about each one of these real briefly. So if we're not real sure, we'll come back to it. So urban water use efficiency, the efficient management of water resources for beneficial uses, preventing waste, or accomplishing additional benefits with the same amount of water. So the examples they give are very focused on municipalities, rate structuring, incentive policies, including
Water meters.
appliances, water budgets for homeowners, installing water metering infrastructure. So,
That sounds like one for another.
Right,
Okay.
we can assume municipal.
okay.
Yep.
All right, so consensus, that's an obvious no for everybody, okay. All right, and again, a few of these, as Randy talked about, there's gonna be overlap. There's gonna be some things we definitely would wanna comment, but we maybe don't need to spend tons of time on as a group. So, but we'll
Say
get,
three's a maybe then, huh?
yes,
Yeah.
yep.
I agree.
So, okay, so we're gonna have 3 as a maybe for now?
And
Okay.
I think as some of those other ones that we talked about is there may be sometimes a joint meeting. Let's just say the Flood and Meadows group is working with that one, and maybe we just, I don't know, but then.
For the floods going to occur on ag,
Right.
yeah,
Right, and then too, we've got the ditches and the weirs and things like that that
to get impacted.
could impact it, correct?
So you're starting to see why it all gets so fuzzy and interconnected. But that's not a bad perspective to gain, if you look at each one of these, you go, okay, that's
what
really
we're
for somebody
supposed to
else,
do.
but I'm aware of what you're looking at. All right.
Okay, let the Delta take care of itself.
Come on, careful.
Or did you say no on 4, or,
Yeah, that's it.
or does the group say no on 4?
No,
I'd say no,
Okay.
personally. So just kind of go.
Okay, your secretary's trying to catch up with you. Okay, so flood management was a maybe, correct?
Oh, 5.
Oh, and Delta is a no. Everybody's reading ahead now. Okay, conveyance regional local. Did we get to that one yet?
That's where we are now.
So you're finding a tool in there to be able to mark out a bunch.
Yes,
I
yes.
saw that too.
I think that's a maybe or yes.
So the conveyance or distribution of water
5 is a maybe or yes?
from locally developed sources to the end users located within the same watershed or river system. So that could potentially be some of our irrigation systems.
Distribution within the water.
Or how you reducing, water diversions.
So we can leave that as a maybe for now?
Yeah, maybe.
All right, number 6, system reoperation. The improvement of existing operations and management procedures of water facilities to meet needs more efficiently and reliably rather than relying solely on infrastructure improvements, though minor physical modifications to existing facilities may be necessary. So conveying additional water supply from above ground, this is an example, conveying additional water supply from above ground reservoirs to groundwater basins when supplies are high in order to bank water and prevent flooding in the reservoirs. So this one's a little vague to me personally. It could be a whole host of things. Their example doesn't really, but for ag, I see it as a maybe.
Ken tries it in percent of them. Well, it's-
I don't know, is that- Maybe a maybe, I mean, Share Valley is the only one that has any room in their groundwater for storage capacity. Everywhere else is a drain, so.
Right. So we leave it as a maybe for the time being?
You got excess water, you wanna stick it in the ground.
The problem is when we have excess water, which is rare, you know, it would, I see potential, but it's gonna be a lot of work
Yeah.
to develop this, because
And that's just an example.
on normal years,
So,
there is no excess water to divert in the wintertime. It's called for somewhere else, so if you wanted to put it out in the area that's a recharge,
True.
you can't, because that water is supposed to go to the lakes or somewhere else, so.
Or downstream.
Central Valley, don't they actually do recharge, they've got actual recharge groundwater wells that actually shut water.
You know, one of the
Okay.
issues I think in Monterey, a lawsuit
So that's
is the current water bank,
Yeah, so
where
that's not
it's
something,
being stored underground.
not a priority.
But then, I don't know, then you get into contamination of groundwater though, when you're,
So it's not something.
Because it's a-
we're
it's
really
direct.
addressing.
It seems to me that if we're trying to focus on like 3 to 6 resource projects, it doesn't.
I agree.
So they say no.
More about pumping water.
I go
oil wells.
am I gathering no?
So you guys,
Fracking.
just so we're clear, 6 is no, or I'm not saying that, I'm asking if that was the group is.
Force the water into
Or is it
oil
maybe?
wells.
Well, I think we need to, if we need to stick to a couple 6 or less
We're-
of these, then we have to just really be.
We're not, yeah, and we're not hard and fast. This
If
is,
if we need it, we'll pull it back.
yeah, exactly. Yep.
I think 6, 7, 8.
Okay, well, I'm just from a record keeping standpoint,
Yep.
trying to figure out, did you scratch 6 then?
Yep, we scratched it for
Okay,
now.
So, we're on
So-
number 7?
So now we're gonna go to number 7. So this is water transfers. So, and this is maybe not transfers in the sense we've talked about from a big transfer standpoint. Water delivered from one water user to another with the water returned at some specified future date, either in kind or at a specified ratio. So again, these are just examples that they give. So it doesn't necessarily mean that's all inclusive of what they are looking at here.
I think we gotta stay away from, I don't think I think we gotta stay away from water transfers, if you ask me.
Any,
That's my
But-
opinion.
Look at the examples, Russell, before we make a decision. That's not necessarily water sales.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Their definition or their example, I mean, an example is transferring water conserved by crop idling. So somebody decided to idle a field for a year. We've got potentially available water. Can that be transferred to another user?
within the mill race though, we can do that amongst ourselves if we want to already.
We can do
We
that
don't
too.
have to do.
Yeah, the water master can do those.
Right.
Well, we can, without the water master, we can do it at ours because he has no jurisdiction below the diversion point anyways.
So,
So is that a yes or no? I mean, is that something that affects the water?
you know, we can put it as maybe, Holly, and then as they go through, when we try to get to this 4 or 6, you don't have them, you come back to it.
Well, but you know, it's helped me
They're
through this
open
process.
still. They're
Oh,
is
bold,
that
bold
I'm-
is yes
I'm
for
just kinda
sure.
saying,
Yeah.
If there was money, how could we help that, how I'm looking at
I can do
this,
them in
if
italics.
there's money
We could bold the yes
Eventually.
please.
to help people with water transfer, how would that money be spent? That's what's going in my mind, that's where it's helping me with the no, yes, or maybe. And I'm kind of saying, well, if there isn't really any effective way that we can improve that process or throw money at it, then see, you wouldn't get my vote, because I can't see it for us, that makes it for somebody else. But, you know, water users say, yeah, boy, if we had an ability to take a big old pipe and dig it over here and put it back over here, then it would be a maybe or a yes for me. But I can't see how money can be used in our area, I mean, we're talking about our area, that I can see, so that's why we have a big group here, so I said, nah, you're fine, we can do it this way. Do you see any, if somebody was gonna have money, could money be spent for helping water transfer in your,
Not without a lawsuit.
Right.
We'll be realistic, you know,
I'm looking down by the lake, yeah, you know.
whatever affects one usually affects somebody else in between and, you know.
Well, and we already have an existing water rights adjudicated
yeah,
system
so
that
I'd
kind
say
of, yeah.
It's on the water transfer.
Okay.
Right.
So
All
we
paid
saying,
water, so-
Yeah.
Was that a no?
I'll buy it.
okay.
By connotation, it's kind of another word, water transfer.
Yeah,
Especially, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would like to spread that a little bit. Yeah.
All right, number 8. And again, if you'll look at this sheet, you can see they've got these strategies grouped into a couple of themes or a few themes. So as we get into number 8, it goes into one of their other objectives, which is actually increasing water supply. So conjunctive management, and this is actually, somebody sent me a,
I sent you a
Yeah.
fact sheet that
Yeah.
came from Alan Fulton.
so if somebody's looking for more information about conjunctive management, we've got a resource for you. But the coordinated and planned use and management of both surface water and groundwater resources to maximize the, I guess that's it.
Availability and reliability.
Thank you. Availability and reliability of water supplies. So, we are looking at new groundwater legislation, and the whole theme of the pushback on that from ag interests was groundwater legislation needs to go hand in hand with good surface water management, because if we don't have surface water available, we start tapping groundwater to replace that. So, so just, again, this is my personal 2 cents as a member of the ag community, that potentially that is something this group does need to be looking at, because we're being impacted from a regulatory standpoint with this concept.
Maybe.
As
Everybody's-
your assistant, I agree.
Maybe or yes.
Yes, I mean, they're interrelated.
So you have some better information on this, Holly, that you've shared?
Yeah, I did after, because this topic came up at the Jeff Carmichael asked, what did that even mean? And so I sent a fact sheet of the definitions at UMA, but then and also to the other work group chairs.
I actually tried reading that, I did read it, I still wasn't sure how it would work for us, but that's why I'm saying.
Well, I'm just saying, I guess at this point, I know we have to like have all the projects in there. I think there's a relationship between surface and groundwater and how we're managing one impacts the other that affects something in the watershed. So at this point, we don't have to have a project, and even if we have a yes, we may have nothing when we get down at the end of 2 years associated with that, right?
Well, potentially, but I just look at what I mean, we had historic groundwater legislation passed.
Right.
And
We don't know all of it.
Would this relate to our forest management too? Because there's no way we're gonna make it rain, but we're losing so much water in the Frenchman area because it doesn't make it to the lake anymore because of the overgrowth. So I mean, it's documented that, you know, and I've heard others, I've heard Mr. Jackson talk about how much the Feather River is losing that it used to have. So I don't know if that fits into this category, but it's hard to get water, but I think we could use some of the water we're
And
losing.
see, then that would be a forest thinning project, any kind of forest management would be into that, so that would be another group. But we certainly could buy into the concept with money, and we could say, yeah, we think that that's good, and then we just would add more to the bigger group to say, well, we got 4 groups all thinking we gotta thin the forest.
Because if that water doesn't make it into those little tributaries at once, that go down into deep, so it affects surface water and underground water.
so should we leave it for a maybe for now for this
Are you
group?
talking about number 8 still? Is that what
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
I'd make it a yes.
a yes.
I think that's one way we might be able to make up a little water.
We only have 2 yeses so far.
Yeah, that's
Well,
what
there
it
is a forest management and ecosystem management one later down, 2122.
So 8's a yes.
Yes, we're moving on to number 9.
Yeah, 8 for now. Again, we can revisit this as we get through the whole list.
Desalinate seawater, we're kind of far from the sea.
No,
So make that
no,
a 9.
no.
We got a lot of salty ground in our
We
place.
got a lot of
I'm on
salty
that,
characters
yeah.
that we want to desalinate our members.
Are you saying this desalination program can reduce the saltiness of our local rivers?
Yes, I think that's exactly. That's all, on a regular basis.
10 is a no.
All right. Okay, all right.
Although I gotta tell you, there was a recent study done in Wyoming, I think by the University of cloud seeding and impacts on high altitude snowpack, and I think they found some beneficial results. But I don't know how much we really get into this.
Well, they did some in Sierra Valley.
There used, I know,
Still
I have some stuff in my office that shows a lot of those burners that were located all over the watershed. But to my knowledge, the only active ones at this point are the ones that PG&E uses to enhance the precipitation in the upper north for their projects. And it has been controversial in that area. They burn, silver iodine with propane. And it burns and it goes up into the air. A few years ago, there was some people got really concerned about the effect of silver on health.
This is not mercury?
And it was really interesting. I went to a meeting up in Chester and I felt like it was in an Aaron Brockovich meeting with all the PG&E people standing out there trying with the scientists, and there really wasn't any conclusive evidence. And of course, even like you're stealing our water because you're precipitating it out, and they call it popcorn snow, but it's not really a broad thing in the watershed.
In the 80s, they were going to do that in our area, and Department of Water Resources was, and we went down and fought that because they wanted to earmark 15% of our flows.
Oh, that being their water that they
Yes,
created?
they created.
No.
So
Maybe
that was
not.
an immediate.
No.
So are we on yes or no on number 9?
That is a big no.
10 is a no.
Okay. Trying to keep us moving.
Okay,
Good job.
municipal recycled water, the recycling and reuse of water originating from a municipal treatment plant. But potential example can be utilizing that water for irrigation.
Which is
We do
happening
have
here
a couple of places, we have that both here in American Valley and up in Sierra Valley with the Loyalton facility.
And
Some of those are just
the
private contracts.
SPI pond out here will eventually be taking, stormwater from part of
To
the
me.
mills. Yeah. I know you knew about it, part of the mill site.
How's that ever happen?
We'll be taking water from part of the mill site, and it's gonna go over there, and it'll have to meet all the water quality standards. It's right now planned to be used for fire protection, that's a regional benefit. And, Jesse Segarra's got the lease on the SDI property to irrigate that, and I know Russell's interested in getting his hands on some of it.
Oh, yes, I.
And that's, but, you know, it is something.
So maybe,
Was also, because Dave negotiated with Zuna and the mill with the water that was in the SPI when the low to.
So this might be a good example of one that we don't necessarily delve into at great length, but we would definitely want to comment and say that's a concept. Obviously, this, excuse me, group would be very supportive.
That's maybe
maybe.
it, that's maybe it, because, maybe even Greenville's site up there could do something like that instead of just running it in Wolf Creek.
They don't do that.
Well, and that's what SDI's, that's not a laughable thing, that's what SDI is trying to get away from, is the WDRs in discharging it into surface water, if they can put it in the pond, and these water quality standards.
It can go to a beneficial
it's got
use.
more beneficial uses instead of putting it into the creek and having all the regulatory issues of that, so. You're not too far off on that for Greenville, if that's, you know, looking down the line, that may be something you want to look at, you know, so I applaud the examination of that. It seems like it shouldn't apply, but when you think about it, ooh, it could
all right, we
be.
got a maybe.
Okay,
Is it a maybe or a
Yeah.
yes?
maybe. Okay, so surface storage, CalFed, State Water Project, state and federal governments have funded investigations into, these are the new storage sites, 5 sites, so Temperance Flats, Sites Reservoir, for surface storage that would meet the goals of water supply, reliability, water quality, and ecosystem restoration. So for this region, I'm not sure how important that is because it's below us, essentially, so. Okay.
Everybody's okay with that?
Alright. Okay, so surface storage, regional, local. Use of human-made above-ground reservoirs to collect water for later release when needed. Expanding existing regional examples, regional or local facilities. Developing new regional or local facilities. Randy, I'm not sure if this drills down clear to the idea of developing a stock pond for drinking water, livestock, or?
There's a sideboard on it, to be honest with you. I will share, and I can get everybody a copy after they find it. When we were doing the general plan update, I think we found a 54 plan. I think it was financed by DWR, 54 Plymouth County Land Use Plan. It had a lot of freeways,
54?
1954.
With freeways in Plymouth County? With freeways in Plymouth County?
Yeah, all these interchanges and stuff, and, you know, Brown administration at the time. But we also found some stuff that showed virtually, you know, Genesee would be under a reservoir. So at one point, there was a pretty extensive investigation by DWR of potential reservoir
Indian
sites
Valley too.
Indian Valley. So I don't know what to say, yes, maybe, but, you know, maybe stock ponds. You know, I don't know how the water rights work here to develop a stock pond.
Well, then we get into a whole permitting process. Yeah.
As long as the water originates, that watershed originates on your property, you can, if it's not, then you can't.
Well, I'd say yes, because we keep telling our state we need more reservoir, we need this. And I know we're on top, but I think at least a maybe.
On 13 is a yes.
It's a maybe for now, and even to broader goals of fire protection. I mean, they use those ponds for fighting fires.
So
So
it also might be a good, not to just add, but I'm thinking urban infrastructure to get a lot of our tanks where they don't leak like crazy in the local.
That'd be municipal though.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Oh, yeah,
but
sure.
I've seen it tying into that as well as that.
and that's where there's some of these concepts that obviously the municipal group would take the lead on, but we as community members would be very supportive because it would increase water efficiencies overall. So Okay, so moving on, we're gonna shift gears to water quality objectives. So number 14, drinking water treatment and distribution. Drinking water in this context is via a public water system. A public water system is defined as having 15 or more service connections or regularly serving at least 25 individuals daily, at least 60 days of the year. So we've got upgrading aging water storage and distribution systems as an example, improving water systems to prevent cross connections and backflow and distribution systems. So that's potentially an area of interest for this region, but maybe not necessarily this group needing to delve into it very deeply.
No, let the municipality do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so now on 15.
As long as they are.
Yeah.
Oh, they
All right, number 15.
The only applicable part I could even imagine is if you can take advantage of farm labor housing and have a big enough crew, and I don't see anybody here having that kind of scale, where you have a common water system where you fall under this 15 and 20. But other than that, I don't see a good fit with agriculture, but definitely municipal.
We have to wait till the 30 year grows.
Roberto?
All right. Number 15, groundwater remediation, aquifer remediation, the removal of constituents or contaminants that affect beneficial use of groundwater. Groundwater remediation systems can employ passive or active methods to remove contaminants. So examples, treating contaminated groundwater while it is still in the aquifer, active, somebody's gonna have to make sure I pronounce that one correctly, in situ method. In situ. Methods generally involve injecting chemicals into the contaminant plume to obtain a chemical or biological removal, extracting contaminated groundwaters. So,
Yeah.
Anybody
Yeah.
know anything?
Oh, I know some bad water, but
It's not contaminated.
no.
okay,
There's something called the Springfield acid pits.
I did the wrong. Yeah, sorry.
Nasties from LA. You should see
got
that.
my wrong formatting.
So we're on 16, matching water quality to use.
Yes. So a definition, a management strategy that recognizes that not all water uses require the same water quality. So here again are irrigation examples. And that suitability for one use may not be suitable for another use. A water quality constituent often is only considered a contaminant when that constituent adversely affects the intended use of the water. So they had an example, matching water to agricultural uses that does not contain certain constituents that would reduce crop yields. So
Saying yes?
that one's,
What's your experience with that?
that would kind of go hand in hand to me with the one we focused on before about reusing municipal water for other, yeah. But not sure if our group needs to
Nobody's
delve
managing
into it.
crops for the chemical
yeah, that's-
content of the water at this point. Probably more than weather.
I think we have actually, maybe not in this room, but we have a group of market gardeners who are probably paying a little bit different level of attention to the water quality of their crops, and they have seen some issues, and that's where there's been some differences in pumped water versus surface water when you start looking at some of those water quality things. I've just seen some of those reports that some of those smaller market garden folks who aren't represented.
Why aren't they here?
Because they have 500 jobs, they raise them.
Maybe we should try to drag a few of them in.
That might be a good idea.
Yeah.
They were at a meeting with me this morning, so they have never recovered from it.
So I'm just saying, it's not it doesn't happen, it is something that is looked at sometimes, but not a big deal, so.
It's maybe then.
Yep, we've got it as a maybe, okay.
Some of our worst water is our most fertile water to put on the ground. Because of the minerals, it's a lot better than groundwater, or snow water, because snow water doesn't contain the minerals.
Drink it, but you.
Oh, that's what
Drink
happened.
it.
6 years. But,
You're not glowing in the dark or anything.
but it's actually almost a fertilizer, so, and it would be considered poison if it was in the city.
Well, when I worked on the lower climate, we'd overhead irrigate for growing produce, and there would just be this amazing crust of algae and stuff out of the soil from the river water. But it grew good crops.
Okay, number 17, pollution prevention, reducing or eliminating waste at the source by modifying production processes, promoting the use of non-toxic or less toxic substances.
Yeah.
The implementation of practices or conservation techniques, including activities that reduce the generation and or discharge of the pollutants, and the application of innovative and alternative technologies. So if you look at the examples, ag is brought out as an example in all of our erosion and sedimentation that we cause. There's urban uses, runoff from developing areas, septic tank systems, forestry, pre-harvest planning, streamside management. So it's one of those that definitely has some overlap.
I think this is how many times you beat your significant other question. So if we say yes to this, we're saying that we really are polluters. So if we say no, then we're not polluters.
But saying no also means we've already got a whole host of programs in place that are addressing water quality.
Yeah, we don't. So
Randy, this for,
But if you're
looking ahead for future funding,
If
if
you
you
can
like
activate the
this
funding,
component
you
in,
might have
and
to say
Yeah,
yes.
it's a
you
big
know,
one.
we've got the nitrogen thing, we don't know is unknown.
no,
We've got the
I would
sediment,
say yes.
you know, sediment erosion.
There's gonna be money here. We're gonna need
Unfortunately,
this.
I
Yeah.
agree on your
Yes.
example.
Yeah.
Well,
Because of all the horses out there.
Yeah, I know.
Guilty, we
I
just-
mean, that's all about it. Yeah.
It's
That's
a,
a yes.
it's a potential.
Okay,
I
Number
have
8.
to always combine them with
So we're-
the vision of
18, salt and
18.
salinity.
Yes. Management of salts, including dissolved minerals such as lime, gypsum, and other slowly dissolved soil minerals, and salinity. A condition where dissolved minerals are present and carry an electrical charge. Human causes of salinity include use of home water softeners, groundwater pumping, causing seawater intrusion, and the use of fertilizers or soil amendments.
I don't think that's got to us yet.
So we know,
It's too late for some of our time.
you guys already know?
I'm not.
Okay. 19,
So that's enough.
No.
19 is no, urban storm runoff management is no.
Somebody else work on that.
We don't even need to worry about it.
I mean, I agree, so yes.
I think
20
20 is yes, definition.
Well,
Okay, so 20 is agricultural land stewardship.
I'm guessing yes.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking that's one for us.
I really like the bullet in there, getting extra money for public outreach and education. That's what we're doing.
Yep. Okay.
So, 21,
21 is ecosystem restoration, improvement of modified natural landscapes and biological communities to provide for their sustainability and for their use and enjoyment by current and future generations. So when I first read this, I thought I was looking at potentially, I mean, we've got some wetlands that were created by our man-made irrigation systems, but I'm not sure if that's how, well, they have recovering wetlands. So somebody, I'm open to input on that one.
I think a lot of times we're trying to look at the broader ecosystem services. I mean, as a verbiage that's used, what is agriculture doing in that ecosystem services? And if you look at ecosystem restoration, whether that's increased biodiversity, or if we're gonna do something for increased irrigation efficiency, what can we do that we're also having something in there that we're keeping? I mean, a lot of these, they don't say some of that, but I just was wondering, where is ecosystem services falling? We don't see that in that bulleted items at the beginning.
Well, it seems to me that.
That's
21
actually
should
an economic
definitely get
incentives.
At least a maybe, just because we have so many non-native plants around, and we need to actively work to keep our fields from getting covered by white top and star thistle and bull thistle. That alone, invasive plants alone, I think, so that could at least make a maybe.
Yeah, and I also think there's been the question in some places about fish mitigation. You know, I think there's in some places been kind of like screens so that if you were doing direct diversion, that there weren't fish going into your fields.
So maybe.
Okay, so we've got that one as a maybe. And Holly, to your point, the economic incentives one kind of covers the ecosystem deal. Number 22, forest management. Shall I read it? The application of forestry principles, practices, and business techniques to the management of forests to achieve. Oops, I don't go the
I
right
think
way.
that goes with the uplands one.
Governor's
Yeah.
objectives, different forest
Thank you.
managers have different goals and,
You would imagine just like municipal is gonna take some of the urban
we just,
stuff.
it's actually
Forest
goes
ones
towards.
would take this one.
Yeah.
So
But
say
you
no.
can see the connectedness.
Yeah.
This also includes grazing,
Yeah.
Managing grazing in or near riparian forest. So this would be one we maybe put as a maybe for now. We definitely want to comment on it, like a couple of those others, but we won't necessarily delve into
How do
it.
you manage
It was-
illegal work?
It was amazing how many times managing illegal marijuana cultivation came up at the GRAP meeting.
Is that right?
Surprised me.
You wanna hear something shocking?
Is that right?
Some on the listing of the, it's just on the threatened list,
oh, I know what you're talking about.
you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
not the Martin, is it Martin?
It's related to the Martin,
Fisher.
Fisher.
Right,
In the federal record, they talked about these illegal marijuana farms on the forest. Basically, to reduce the rodent impact on their crops, are using rat poisoning. And what Ed Bumpus told us at Holmes County Coordinating Council is they're using rat poisoning that's not legal in the United States. It's coming from someplace else, and it is getting into the animal population, not just in the deer, it's showing up all over the place. So, and I was like, it's in the federal registry. It's a really serious issue, what's going on with these illegal, and what they're using to try to maintain these crops. Almost shocking.
Were they talking about stealing waters? Was that the context?
It wasn't just water.
No, it was pollution.
Pollution,
everything.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of illegal use, I mean, like when the ag commissioner talks, they're using chemicals
Herbicides and
that aren't licensed here, and they're not doing it in the right way, even if.
They're not permitted.
Legal law.
They are diverting water too, but I don't know
Yes.
if that's.
But that pesticide, that example of the rat poisoning, shocking.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
Plus, there's also
That's
just
an
a huge amount of
anti-coagulant.
Yeah, kills everything.
Alright, forest management, let's stay on
23,
23, land
Forest
use,
management was easy, maybe?
maybe,
maybe, because
so 23, land use management,
planning.
land use planning and management.
Yep, the orderly and planned use of land, resources, facilities, and services with a view to securing the physical, economic, and social efficiency, health, and well-being of urban and rural communities. You just went through a general plan update.
Would this all be covered already in that? I mean, you would go straight from the general plan?
Right.
There's a lot of it in there. But remember, this plan also affects Sierra County, it's trying to update their too.
They're trying to do that too.
So,
Pay attention.
Yeah, I think pay attention, because I mean, even though there hasn't been any money for Williamson Act, there's still both counties have those advisory committee that, you know, if the real estate of things turned around at some point, that might be done, maybe not today, so maybe it's not.
So-
But we really did update a lot of this in the general plan update for things. So-
but from the sense of the water plan for future projects, to Holly's point, you know, maybe there's an opportunity to secure some funding for ag land preservation through either tax breaks or incentives to keep land in production, those sorts of things too. So that might be a
Maybe.
Strong maybe.
strong maybe. I don't know how to format that one.
This is in that.
Alright, it's a strong maybe.
Because we're trying to hold it to 4 to 6, aren't we?
Yeah. But again, like I said, there's gonna be some of these that we might just make a few brief comments that, you know, our group talked about this issue, here's our comments, but we didn't necessarily delve into it. Okay, so recharge area protection, number 24. Natural recharge areas are those where good quality surface water is able to percolate through the sediments and rocks to the saturated zone, which contains groundwater. If recharge areas cease functioning properly, there may not be sufficient groundwater for storage or use.
So you're on 24, right?
Yes. Yep. So examples, We've got water quality monitoring as a potential example of something that they include as a project within that. Protecting existing and developing new recharge areas, including in-stream recharge areas, which allow water to percolate through the stream bed itself. Anything else there? So low impact, this goes to our runoff issues in some ways. And capturing tailwater and some of those things.
So they would tie into the next one, sediment management, which is the area land is gonna have to deal with sediment erosion management plans here, so that for sure might be a yes.
So what's
Potential
24?
assistance.
I'd say 24 should be a maybe since it does tie in with sediment management.
Okay, so 24 is a maybe. Now we're at 25 is sediment management,
That is good, yes.
and that's a yes.
I think so, just knowing what's coming down the road. anyways.
So Carol, from your viewpoint, do you see if we delve into this and focus on it from a project standpoint that we could solicit some?
Because what's coming down the pipe at us is we've got this first farm plan, and then we've got a nitrogen manager plan, and the next thing coming at us is a sediment and erosion control. And for low impact areas like ours, if we get in that designation, you can do a group sediment erosion control plan. If you're in a high erosion area, each individual operation has to do a sediment erosion control plan.
So Randy, would this be example?
I'd say yes.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna,
I already had a grant application to help you create those. As you were saying, there's a project.
yep, exactly.
Either group or singular to create this management plans that you know is coming down the pipe.
You know, there are areas too that it's not an erosion problem, it's a sediment deposit problem.
Deposit, exactly, and that's what we hope we can show that.
In the lower ends of Indian Valley and.
I think it
Our-
was.
our ranches
There are some
capture
places,
the
yeah,
sediment.
I have a place there that had probably 5 foot of silt built up since I was a kid. I mean, the field doesn't even get the same direction.
But if there's funds to help us, develop a study or show this kind of stuff that we're capturing and
Some of the creeks.
instead of creation.
Yep.
Definitely, yes.
So that's yes, 26 is watershed management. Process of creating, implementing plans, programs, projects, and activities to restore, sustain, and enhance watershed functions.
It's pretty broad.
So,
So
Kind of
overall,
giving you away.
it says improving upland vegetation management, improving water retention for base flows, improving water quality and stream bank protection, wetland restoration, improving groundwater and retention and storage in major aquifers.
It's just example stuff.
Right, those were examples.
it's kind of overarching with everything
Yeah.
in my mind.
Well, that could potentially give you funding for even creating a plan, couldn't it, if you weren't doing something?
It's pretty open-ended, so it's one that maybe we can focus on some ag-oriented issues that funnel into that.
If you want to.
So it's a yes or
I'd
maybe.
say probably a yes.
Yeah. Let's see what the rest of them are.
Okay,
So
so
it's a yes, maybe.
We have 5 more to go.
Maybe yes.
it's a maybe.
He's got it.
Maybe plus.
Okay, it's got yes. We need to, we'll do that.
Okay, are we maybe or yes? I put maybe on it, so,
Maybe on 26.
okay.
Okay.
Okay, so 27, this speaks to what Holly was alluding to, economic incentives, financial assistance, water pricing, and water market policies intended to influence water management. So if I fallow a field and don't use all my irrigation water, I should get some credit for that kind of ideas.
No,
Okay. Right.
I don't know if you looked at
What's that? I'm sorry. So their examples are low interest loans, grants, and water rate structures, free services, rebates, and the use of tax revenues to partially fund water services, government financial assistance, fines,
Fines.
economic disincentive used to discourage undesirable water use behavior. So we don't want to get into that mess.
Maybe an Indian bell.
No.
Okay. Outreach and engagement, number 28. So this is people and water, so this is a little more cultural. The use of public communication tools and practices by water agencies that provide the opportunity for public groups and individuals to contribute to positive water management outcomes. So an example was the Ranch Water Quality Planning Short Course, which promotes California Rangeland Water Quality Management Plan. So Holly's example from earlier. Outreach and education on the Central Valley's general order for existing milk cow dairies and education and environment initiative. So this could potentially be a source for communicating what ag is already doing. And we'd have some funding sources to do that, but I don't know if we need that or not. So not sure.
I guess, I'm going back, and again, this group decides, I'm just re-looking at what Uman, and she's the overall consultant, but the economic, she did have this, maybe
Yeah.
that was something that we eliminated, so I don't know that's just water pricing, because that first thing in there is just even financial assistance. And it doesn't say it has to be from one of those things. Where did it even go? 27?
But we can come back and revisit that one a little bit. Yeah, the consultant Uma that we've been mentioning her name, she had a few general thoughts on ones ag might focus on, but we didn't want to give anybody preconceived
Focus on this.
notions.
No, 27, she just said 27 was maybe with municipal or something like that, it's financial assistance, so 28.
So 28, do we have any strong leanings? Yes, no? Outreach and education or engagement? To me, it could help fund Holly going.
I think you should, and you can go back to our earlier discussion about graph and trying to get elected and officials to understand some things, and you know, whether that's getting out on tours or whatever.
You know, I think you have to have that component. I mean, look at, we did the water stuff and the drought workshop, we were kind of scrambling, where do we find funding or help or assistance for those kind of outreach programs?
They did make it mean.
So we,
I know, I told somebody I was going to a water meeting, they go, good, it's gonna rain today.
so is that a yes or a maybe?
Yes, for me.
Yes, okay.
I'll support that.
Okay. All right, so water and culture, increasing the awareness of how cultural values, uses, and practices are affected by water management and how these have an effect on water management as well. Even regulations reflect cultural values, such as when water is viewed as a commodity rather than as a cultural resource. So examples, enhanced communication and consultation with local tribes on fishery, forest, and watershed issues. Another example, consideration and incorporation of tribal ecological knowledge. So those examples don't lend themselves very well to our group. But from an ag culture standpoint, in terms of what impacts to our water availability due to our communities, I mean, these are pretty historic communities in themselves outside of the tribal communities. That if we lose irrigation in Indian Valley, what does that do to that ranching community? Disappears. So, but again, for this sake of this program,
Our cultural.
I don't know. We've been there for a while.
They focused on the Native American tribal issues. I used the example in the the municipal work group of our cultural practice of green lots. How much water we spend. And it is a cultural definition for us. To, you know, mow and clean up our lives and our communities. But, you know, that really was something to talk about in that work group, because of the curtailments last year and the limitations that were placed on lawn watering. My example was I stopped watering my lawn and stopped mowing it. What happened was it survived, and when I mowed it, it rained and it got poured. So, you know, it's that. I'm just trying to reach beyond the Native American thoughts on there, which you're thinking about any kind of cultural practices that might help with related to ag. I can't really think of any. No?
No.
Say no.
Water dependent recreation?
Well, that's kind of a tough one, because it may affect us at certain points over there. I mean, normally I'd say no, but when it talks about allowing public access to
Yeah,
all
I didn't like that one.
waterways, that means anybody can.
Go along our
And
irrigation
we don't
ditch.
even know what the definition is right now of a navigable.
Yeah, because of the wetlands, the wetlands definition.
Yeah, so if that ditch comes from the Feather River and up to my place, I mean, we've had kayakers before, but I don't want a lot of them.
Well, you know, there's some court cases that say you own the land and it's a navigable stream. They have the right to, and that came out of the Platte River in Wyoming court case, where she strung barbed wire across the Platte River. And the court case, the Supreme Court basically said the river, the waters are navigable stream, but you can't touch the bottom because that's where they do EPA,
Waters of the U.S.
Waters of the U.S. rule that they're playing around with is a scary thing because they're trying, it says they're trying to simplify it and give everybody a better understanding. And I'm going, okay, there's a road drainage ditch that has enough flow that goes into a navigable stream. Does that make that drainage ditch another part of the wetlands in the navigable stream? It is a concern in that new rule. And there's been a lot of fighting on that. I mean, Congress has even gotten involved. I mean, some of you may have followed it. I looked at this recently.
Is there a
I don't know.
definition of a navigable stream?
Courts have defined it. It
As
has to do with interstate commerce.
A barge, I mean, will it float a barge or
No.
does it float out here to?
Hey,
It's
From
not,
what I heard,
but it's
That's why they're trying to
the
clarify.
test is pretty low for a navigable stream.
Yeah.
but if you have a pond on your place, that's gonna go under the waters of the U.S.
But that may be not a navigable pond.
Well, according to
Yeah.
the information I got at convention, it was serious, that you won't be able to stop somebody if they wanted to.
So do we put maybe?
Yeah, let's do
Maybe,
that.
Let's do that, because this one also touches on the agritourism, such as the waterfowl hunting out of Green Gulch, it touches on the bird watching, bird viewing, so it could also touch our agritourism,
Touch a lot of private lands.
yeah.
Again, my understanding, the land is yours. If you can stop access
Last one?
to the water, it's a navigable.
Yeah, well,
Next question.
I thought that
They
too.
can't get to your lawn.
The last one is number 31,
So this is the catch-all.
other strategies.
So,
Well, I think, for speaking for the people that are not here in the room right now, I say this is a definite yes, especially for our niche farmers. Because they're not here right now, I can see them doing some very creative things on them.
Well, are you talking about
Let's see,
30?
I'm 31,
Oh, you're on.
other strategy, I was 34.
Water to the record.
Oh, yeah.
That's supposed to be frog.
Oh, frog collecting?
That's a mistake.
Land
Watch
retirement.
out, Rusty's calling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dress up in that frog outfit.
All right, so we captured 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 already that are yeses for our group. So they're in bold and blue right now.
No, look, yes or no?
you know,
The last one, other strategies? Or what's your question?
We had yes
It's a yes.
right now.
For
This is a yes.
the niche, for the niche
It's
farmers.
just, some of these things like irrigated land retirement, I can't personally retire my water right.
Right.
No,
Because
no.
it is not my water right, it stays with the land.
But you can idle a field.
I
But
can
there's,
idle it for a period of time, but it not.
Or you could idle it forever, I think is what they're
You can
implying.
do crop idling. You can
Yeah.
do those of the
I mean, you could say, I am no longer
You tell the
irrigating.
neighbor that I'm gonna idle them, but you're gonna pay me for the water that I'm not gonna use.
But I don't think,
Yeah, you-
I don't think.
you know,
We looked just
yeah,
at
you
examples
can
that are
actually
the
lose
ones
it
that
if you don't use it.
necessarily do. So,
Yeah.
okay,
your water rights.
so we're,
Because it's
do
not
we have to do
beneficial
anything
use.
else with this?
It's self my water.
Do we need to revisit our meetings?
Well,
You can lose.
yeah,
I don't think you have to worry about.
I'm just gonna wait till the side conversations ended.
If you don't use it, You're subject to.
Yeah. I need to whistle.
Abandon it unless there's a futile call within 7 days.
I stay on our agenda here.
We're in Wyoming.
Not to Quincy
Prime
Library.
preparation.
Hey, our coordinator has a comment about whether we're relooking at our maybes or.
So we have 6 for sures right now.
I saw seven.
Oh, 7? Did I miss one? Ag water use efficiency, conjunctive management, pollution prevention, ag land stewardship, sediment management, other strategies. What did I miss?
What about recharge area protection, is that maybe?
Which number was that?
17. Do you have a number?
We have 6.
Yeah, we have 6.
Recharge area is number
How did
24.
we go to 7? How did we get 7? Well, let's go by the numbers.
So then our maybes go by the wayside just because.
Well,
we have 6?
we're done.
Okay.
So real quickly, let's look at our maybes and see if we need to trade out one or wanna be overachievers and take on 7. And again, the maybes are things that we can still provide some limited comments on, we just don't wanna spend a whole bunch of time as a group on. So our first maybe was flood management. So that was number 3 on the list, so if you wanna flip back.
I have 7 yeses too.
So what am I missing?
So let's go to numbers. So we have number 1,
Number 1.
number 8.
Yep.
17.
Yep.
Number 20.
Yep.
25.
Yep.
8.
Explain.
And
Oh,
31.
28, I missed that one, okay. So yes, we do already have 7 then, thank you. Okay. So, is there anything there in those for sures where some of these maybes should take a higher precedent for ag? We have the flood management, conveyance, municipal recycled water, surface storage on a local basis, matching water quality to use was a maybe, ecosystem restoration, forest management was a maybe, land use planning and management was a maybe, recharge area protection, watershed management, and water dependent recreation. Is there anything in our bolded, whether it be other strategies, outreach engagement, we're probably going to be the ones that maybe float a little bit, because number 1's for sure. Number 20 is for sure for our group. I don't think we can give those away.
Why did we keep
Yeah.
16 a maybe, matching water quality to use?
I haven't even know.
I think there was a little dissension, so we didn't have quite a, so I left it as a maybe.
And 26 was, is a maybe versus a yes, or was that, at one point I had it as a maybe yes?
It was a strong maybe.
Watershed management,
Maybe.
Just, I think we left that one as a maybe because it was kind of the concept of the whole plan. I mean, we would almost be commenting on that idea.
IRWM, it's right there.
What's that?
And then it's out in the IRWM.
Well, that's
title, right?
To me, it seemed a little repetitive of our basic goal here. I don't know.
So,
The local storage.
That was a maybe 2 as for service storage.
what number is that?
13. We put that as a strong maybe, is what I wrote.
Yeah, I was for that.
Should we make a yes?
I don't know, that's strong.
Rick's trying to reduce his workload here.
I think we could take 30 off as a maybe, because the law's gonna dictate some of that
That's true.
anyway, we're not gonna know what to do with
and do we see much opportunity for funding that's really critical to this group where we delve into that topic very much? Is that a good way to maybe help us make that decision?
Will recreation be covered under what, Holly? And what group is gonna talk about that?
I'm not sure on that one because it could be all. I mean, you know, the forest and the meadows group, that's gonna fall right in with what they're gonna be doing.
Well, I think we're taking that one off for now.
Okay,
What number is that?
30,
So 30's a no now?
okay,
No now?
a no. All right,
Now and now.
so do we wanna,
28 was a for sure, right? 28's the outreach.
yes. Do we see with 31, is there a way to incorporate some of that into one of these that we're already focusing on? Because that one, in reading these, seemed a little, and I'm just asking.
So what specific, Milo, do you see in there that you're saying for like small niche market?
Is there a way to incorporate some of their,
I could see them going in and doing that rain-fed agriculture, doing a dryland type farming, they could see that one following underneath there. I can also see somebody going in like they do at Martin's Ranch over there in Standish, where they capture almost 80,000 gallons worth of water in underground tanks that runs off of their roofs.
Can that be number one though? Could it fit under one? Could we-
It might, it could.
yeah, that's where I was thinking that some of those strategies could almost fit in one of these other categories that are very ag focused. We just have
Right.
different segments of ag. We've got larger scale commercial ag and we've got some niche.
Some of these little bulleted items, we just have some additional things, but under that agricultural water use efficiency talking about.
So does that,
I could see how those two would go together.
okay,
I
okay,
definitely could.
okay,
I would like to keep it up on the radar for you.
yep, okay.
So are you adding
So
31?
other strategies is falling off.
We're gonna take that off because some of the practices,
So fell to 6.
No, we still have 7, we didn't get rid of the yes, we just are getting rid of names.
yeah, we did actually get rid of a yes on that one, yeah,
Oh, 31.
yes,
31 is what we get rid of, sorry.
Because
Yep.
it's maybe now.
it's a no. Because we're going to take a broader definition of agriculture, also includes smaller niche operations as well as our larger scale irrigation, and incorporate that into one. Okay, all right, stay focused, everybody, we're almost done.
More chocolate.
Yeah. There's coffee.
Leave me alone.
All right, so we still have some maybes. Do we see opportunities to maybe meld them in? Or do we want to just take those maybes and leave it like this list with the stipulation, we're gonna be providing some brief comments on those maybes, but as a group, we've found our 6 we want to focus on? Is that fair?
I like that.
Okay,
I'm
And
gonna
then
say,
maybe
good job.
later it'll morph into one of the other ones.
yes, yeah, and we just provide some comments.
Right, but leave them as babies because it's all starting to sound blurred now.
Yeah.
Yeah, cause I think, you know, like whenever like that flood management one, that may be one that certain people from this group wanna co-participate in or whatever.
Yep. Okay, did everybody that was having the side conversation catch that?
They'll go along with it. They'll go along.
Sorry.
We're getting near a wrap up here,
It
Holly.
says right here, do not have
We
signs.
got your attention.
Yeah, see Russell's reading the rules.
I got my rules, sorry.
I know. Not, no side discussions, no hallway
I
discussion.
know, I read it.
Okay, all right,
Sorry.
you just didn't follow it.
I know.
It's a ruler.
Okay,
That's right.
so the consensus with this side discussion was we've got 6 strategies that this group will really focus on and delve into because they're pretty high priority. The last one, this other strategies that we were looking at from more of a niche farming, smaller operation standpoint, that can actually really morph into the ag water use efficiency. We just have to have a good broad definition of agriculture, includes both our larger scale irrigation as well as small niche operations that focus more on a farmer's market or direct consumer marketing. Does that sound fair, Willow, to you?
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, most definitely.
okay.
I
So we're
attended-
leaving we've got our for sure categories, and then we've got these maybe categories that our group's going to provide some comments on, but we're not necessarily going to delve into them too deeply. So does that sound fair? We got consensus? Okay.
Even though we're rural, urban agriculture is a real rage right now. I
Well,
sat
for
in-
funding, yeah, that would be a major,
I
We have to
sat
be
in-
defined urban though.
Well, I heard on
Quincy's
a
urban.
presentation,
No, it's not.
LA County,
I've looked at all those
presentation,
fundings.
and,
Yeah.
the land next to Sacramento County.
Yeah, you guys, we're gonna
What I'm
have
trying to
that.
say is it's a really growing thing right now. And it's just all part of agriculture, just, it's a dimension that you guys don't normally deal with, but it's there.
Just, oh, we
So
see
do
a
we
lot
have
of
to
them.
set another meeting date after this?
well,
Or are we gonna-
yes, so to finish up, so we're done ahead of time, excellent job, everybody. We need to have another meeting in March, but,
Yeah.
and that will be for sure selecting our chair, and then we're gonna start, I don't know what happened here,
Diving into it.
diving into this, and we'll get a more detailed agenda out. But as part of that, before we set that meeting date, do we want to reach out to a few of these folks that have maybe should have been here, or we need to kind of make sure they get here?
I would think so.
Yeah, you were going to put together that letter too? or that-
Yes, yes. So I'm gonna do a letter, kind of just a brief one pager outlining what your responsibilities are if you come to these meetings and what the chair responsibilities would be, and just a real brief summary of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Maybe include those 6 areas.
Yep.
Has the same,
Yes.
so everybody's doing the same thing.
Well, they're deciding which ones, and that was part of the deal.
That's right.
Decided they had 20 yeses. And I was like,
Well, you
"Well,
guys, you guys struggled with it too, you
Yes.
see how many maybes you had, you saw all this connectedness?
Yeah.
And so, the lesson was for Holly to come in here and try to limit you down to 6 or 7, which would be manageable, because we weren't really looking at it that way, but that was a lesson from the other 2 work group meetings. And you guys really kind of did the same thing, but you ended up with more maybes, they ended up with more yeses.
Okay,
What are
so,
good days for people in March? What's a good day to have a meeting?
never.
I say, put it down now and we'll work around it.
Okay.
For me anyway, whatever's good, as long as I know ahead of time.
I'm not available on the 12th.
Nobody even knows if they're gonna be alive.
Let me find the management group schedule.
That's being very
We
positive.
need
like,
it all.
They keep talking
It's
about the
Kate's
drought.
spring break.
So maybe
Yeah.
16th.
That'd be better.
Randy, do you know off the top of your head that meeting date?
March 25th.
Just get some
Okay.
focus.
Well, it's not off the top of my head, it's on the.
That's the
PowerPoint.
regional
Oh,
watershed
thank you.
management
Yes,
group.
thank you. That was what I was looking for.
Is there your hand up?
Yeah, because I think she wants to schedule this next corporate meeting prior to that, so that could be an update, right?
Yes.
The week of the 16th.
Yeah, the week of the 16th,
Sounds good.
Okay.
What's it, man?
Wednesday the 18th.
Oh,
You won't
Okay,
get
when
there.
will you be here, Holly?
Well, I don't need to be here. I'll help you the stuff beforehand.
18th, 19th,
The
March.
9th.
The 13th, are you here that week of the 9th?
Is there
This is the week of the 9th.
a time of day or place that we want to try to focus on as well? I mean, would a later in the afternoon, so we maybe go into the evening a little bit, but it doesn't impact the workday quite as much, or,
2 o'clock's good for me,
Yeah, 2
Two.
o'clock.
okay.
doesn't ruin the whole thing.
And our goal, my goal, will always to try to be as efficient as possible. So, like today, we did get done ahead of time. So are we thinking, and day of the week, any day of the week that's better for folks? Nils, your meetings were,
I'm not available on the 12th, which is a Thursday, so, and then the RCD meets the 19th,
Dave's gone on the 9th.
so we don't want to know.
Yeah, he's gone, so don't put, I have his schedule right here, yeah.
so
Are you
how,
looking at the meetings being here in Quincy?
does this location work for everybody?
We can also do it at the county office, so that this is a nice room too. Both of them have internet access and
The only reason that, we had the flood meeting out there, and it seemed like it was pretty cramped, the other part is that is also the staff room, this room, you have less interruptions or something, so. But if you want it here, I can go check at the front desk.
Maybe the 11th.
The 11th is kind of what I'm looking at 2 o'clock, so that's a Wednesday. Does that tentatively sound okay? We can float that out there as our date, and then we'll check on facilities.
March 11th, 2 p.m., and then we can check and see whether it's clear or it's your office.
Okay, great, good job, Holly.
Great job.
Good job. The project, development manual.
Yeah,
Just
we,
mention it, take it home, look at it. It was developed some new forms, it was directed to, should we be presenting those new forms and getting some better direction next week from the management group. But please look at this. Everybody's getting it. It is a useful guide. It is painful as to look at this stuff. About what we were talking about acquiring money earlier.
yeah.
Which one is it?
Project development manual.
And so Uma, the consultant's working on improvements to that. And then she's taking that to the management group at their next meeting to approve. And then that will be kind of our packet to start soliciting project ideas and bringing that out.
The direction to Uma was to create forms, and she's done that. Her and I talked about it a couple days ago, and that'll be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you save that?
Yes.
Save it before you.